Tim Hughes here, CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. I'm here with Laura Goodrich. Laura and I are going to talk about the crisis of work. We're going to talk about the future of work. Well, if that may actually be here, COVID, all of these things, change that's taking place. Before we get into that, Laura, where can people find you?
Well, first of all, let me say hello. And I can be found, I think LinkedIn is a great place to begin. So Laura Goodrich on LinkedIn. Our website is GWT Next. That's a great spot. And Laura at GWTnext.com email if that's your druther.
And you're very active on social anyway, aren't you? So
I am.
LinkedIn is a good place.
It is.
To find you. So give me your journey. To explain, quickly, your journey about how you got here and how you got into the transformation and future of work business.
Well, back in 1994, I read an article that was called "On the Cutting Edge of the Digital Age." And it was extremely compelling. It grabbed a hold of me and it never let go. And at that point, I thought to myself, I will never tire of learning about emerging technologies and how they are evolving. I will never tire of that. And it will be a challenge for leaders and organizations. And maybe, just maybe, I could play a role in helping with those challenges.
Fantastic. So why don't you give an overview of how you see the world today in terms of how business and work has changed? Because even though we talked back on the 21st of June, things seem to accelerate and change all the time. And I'm seeing articles all the time about whether we're going back to the office or we're not going back to the office. And if we go back to the office, what type of office we're going to go back to. So why don't you give us your view of where things are at the moment?
Well, I believe, so often we talk about the pandemic, but I think that the changes that we encountered within the pandemic are just really the beginning. It created an accelerated move in transformation. And even though many organizations were very much focused on business continuity, not necessarily innovation and creativity, it created a reality of the need for it. For many that were going, oh, sure, just kind of having the light conversation about it. I think, they're like, okay, this means business now. And I have had conversations with consulting firms that are just getting slammed. I mean, they have more opportunity than they have people. They have, 450 open requisitions. I mean, leaders and organizations are coming out trying to find the answers. And they don't, and they're not immediately apparent. So, I mean, the bottom line, I believe we're in explosively fast business transformation. I think COVID sort of set it into motion. I also believe that we've got ill effects that have yet to really reveal themselves post the pandemic. So, as I mentioned to you, I think I mentioned to you, Tim, I spent a couple of years working as an advanced trained crisis counselor, just as a volunteer. And what I learned in that role is that people actually are very heroic in crisis. It is after crisis that, sort of the wheels come off the road and, the real challenges that relate to it become much more apparent. So I think those are just beginning to show. And in private conversations, leaders are talking about these things where they have employees that are, when you talk about going back to the office, I mean, that is a hot mess, no matter how you slice it, whether an organization mandates that people are vaccinated or not. If they don't, then it's just a hot mess all the way around. And I've spoken with leaders with large organizations. I mean, they have a massive number of attorneys trying to untangle this situation that's not going to be easy. The other thing that I think is fascinating, will be really important for us to watch and pay attention to, is there's a speculation that there'll be a mass exodus. from the mass resignation or something to that effect. And, people are saying, okay, so it's summer vacation and, people are having fun. It's like, you just wait till September and see what happens. And it'll be quite interesting to see what does, right?
I think it's going to be interesting when people actually go back after having, a couple of weeks off in August or something, and actually saying, you've got to go back to the office. You've got to go back for that hour and a half commute on the train back to the office. Are you really going to do that?
Right. And that's, that will be primary impetus for a couple of things. I mean, the organizations that say, okay, we're going to do a hybrid and we're going to try to have a little bit in the office and, some in work wherever people want to. I mean, they will be well positioned to attract those individuals that are absolutely shocked by the fact that their organization is going to mandate that they jump on that train for an hour and a half in the morning and the afternoon. And just the lack of balance that comes with that. I think, here's an interesting thing. I had a friend that traveled 100,000 miles every week, in an airport all around. A couple weeks ago, met people for lunch and put on the shoes that she had worn historically across. And she got to this restaurant and she's like, I couldn't walk. Like, something terrible was happening with my feet. And I literally couldn't, that sounds so novel. And I recognize that it does. But people have been wearing comfortable shoes and comfortable clothing and have been taking walks in the morning and doing these kinds of things that really have changed a lot. So that may sound novel, but at the end of the day, people don't realize, not to mention the anxiety.
Yeah, I went out on Saturday and I wore the brown brogues that I would normally wear. I've worn to business meetings and that. So first time I've worn them for 18 months and it gave me blisters.
Right.
Because I wasn't used to wearing like hard leather shoes. So I totally empathize with that story.
Yes. And that seems like a small thing, but we're really talking about, sort of a cascading of effect.
Because you've talked about that the pandemic has created a tipping point, which is bigger than remote work.
It is much bigger than remote work. I think that now that organizations recognize it, yes, we can really drive business continuity. The big question that is in their minds is how can we effectively innovate and change? And at the very moment that one organization says we have to that's the reason they want to bring people back to the office. You've got to come back to the office because there's no way to innovate without doing so. There's another organization down the street saying, well, that's a pretty good challenge. Maybe we will just try to show you that we can innovate with a hybrid working environment. Or maybe we're just going to transform this workspace so that that workspace truly is a space of innovation and creativity. And we're going to go in and we're going to really, really figure out how to leverage these emerging technologies to create new and different things. I think that's a really, provocative idea and thought. And, for sure, there are organizations that are ready to capitalize on that. So that tipping point is now sort of setting the table for that kind of innovation and change.
Because one of the things that you've also talked about is the fact that I totally understand that people are resilient, and that what we've done is that we've certainly here in the UK we've done what we needed to do. We've done the right thing that we believe is that we needed to do, and so there's a whole bunch of people. I'm very lucky. I live in a place where we've got open spaces very, very close. But there's people that are not that lucky, that have pretty much been locked up in their flats or their apartments.
Right.
And immediately that's going to have an impact. So we're going to finish what we were doing, and as you say, we're going to then move on to something else. That resilience is going to change. So do you feel that there's a certain amount of knee-jerk reaction going on at the moment with certain organizations saying you have to be back in the office? Or I read recently about the 2 to 3, the 2 and 3, or the 3 and the 2, where you're
Right.
back in the office 3 days a week, or you're home for 2 days a week. They're just,
Mhm.
it does seem like a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction, and I would offer that knee-jerk reaction becomes kind of the way that we operate, in particular when we come through an environment of uncertainty, and moving into an environment of greater uncertainty. So, I mean, our experience over 2.5 decades has demonstrated is that when there's a lot of uncertainty is a very moment that people do hold on to and become tethered to what they know, right? That's where that knee-jerk reaction comes from. That actually, as odd as it might sound, brings a sense of security, and people are looking for a sense of security. So we've heard, over time, many stories, but simple stories of where they are in a place of security. The organization attempts to make a change. It appears to be a change that is novel, simple for people to appreciate, like, let's say, ergonomic chairs or something like that. And all of a sudden, there is this disruption, there is this resistance, and it seems so surprising to them. And it seems surprising at face value, but it doesn't to us, because we know that when there's a lot of uncertainty, people will become tethered to what they know, or, as you note, have a knee-jerk reaction. And that's one of the things that we're working on a lot right now, is that how do we help leaders and organizations stop in that moment when they face a challenge and address that challenge and ask critical questions and really come up with innovative solutions? Because those knee-jerk reactions, while we're operating with those knee-jerk reactions, someone else is coming up with an answer that is a lot faster or simpler or innovative. And it becomes, those knee-jerk reactions can and will become really dangerous to the.
Because when we're scared, we tend to stick with what we know, don't we?
Yes, because when we're scared, we stick with what we know. And when we're trying to jump out from the way of a semi truck hitting us, it's not exactly our most creative time. I mean, like, right? It's an instinctive sort of, run from pain
Yeah.
and be oriented toward those things, that toward pleasure. And pleasure in this case would be comfort, right? The comfort. The people are looking for comfort because they haven't had that. Now, it's an interesting thing. I was noting that in one of the cities in the United States, that once again, the health clubs are locking down and putting some restrictions in, mask restrictions and the like. And oddly enough, as I walked up to the gym yesterday, I'm like, I'm feeling an acceleration with my heart rate. Isn't that fascinating? Right? It's just, I think we don't realize how close to the surface some of these things are. So they will all be things that organizations are going to reckon with. And I think the best thing, I spoke with a very senior leader recently, and again, they were going to go with the 3-2 model. And he said, but the biggest thing that we're letting people know is we're going to iterate with this. We just don't know. We're making a guess that this is that best way for us to go about doing this. But we're letting everyone know again and again, we will have to iterate. We're not sure that this is the best route. We're not sure that it's going to work out well.
Yeah, we do a podcast on Fridays where a bunch of us get together and we talk. And one of the team is from North Fargo, and they tell the story about how one of their local businesses had said they put out a note on the Monday that everybody had to be back in the office the following Monday. On the Tuesday, 50% of the people resigned.
That's an interesting thing. So coming back to the great resignation, or the speculations with it, the research has ranged between 40% and 90% have indicated that they'll move. Now, I mean, I think 90% is a gross exaggeration, but I don't know. And also it's, how many times everyone that we've ever known has said, well, I think it's time to move on or whatever. And what percentage of people actually do that? That's, that's easy talk. But my guess is that there'll be changes, is that people are looking for organizations that genuinely care about them, that genuinely are looking out for their best interest. And they got used to not being cared. They could just, you get over the course of time, you just sort of get used to the beating that transit to work takes and all of those things. And so they realized a lot of things in the last year and a half. So it'll be interesting.
So what do you think, people can do in terms of reconstruction of the health of teams?
I think that stop and have that be a absolute business objective, is to reconstruct the social, emotional, mental health of the team. Have those one-on-one conversations. Be sure to be, asking people, how are they doing? Have conversations that are not task, business objective oriented, conversations like we would more typically have when we went out for lunch, when we walked down the hallway. If the orientation is always so strongly toward business outcomes and not oriented to, genuine relationships, it's very easy to see the grass looking greener, right? And that's where a lot of people are. So there's a unique opportunity to reconnect and then help the team members reconnect with one another, not on the task, but genuinely with one another. And consider doing that in different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the office, right? But there's a lot of different ways that we can come together and that you can bring people together. But I would say put that as an objective. Because the trouble is that you just go, okay, all right, well, we'll focus on that. And people take 2 steps when they need to be taking consistent and have a system and have objectives that people are held accountable to. To ensure that solid foundation, because we believe that the reconstruction of the social and emotional health of the team is a foundation on which to innovate, right? And so if you don't get that security in there, then as you noted, Tim, then that knee-jerk reaction and that, here's how we've done it and really being tethered to how things have been done will prevail. That will win.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've written down in our notes when we spoke, which is something that you said, which is that the social and emotional aspects of the team are a business imperative.
A business imperative.
And if we'd been talking 2 years ago, we would never have said that. We would have said just fire him.
Absolutely, but absolutely we would have said that. That's what would have happened. That's what would have happened. But it is critical now. And here's the thing. Very, very, very few senior leaders are dialed into this. Absolutely. We did research with 5,000 senior leaders, and it was absolutely not on the radar. It was just...
I can imagine. It's more about how can we get people back at the desks at the real estate that we're paying millions of dollars for.
That was much more, they dialed into the realities of transformation, that it was a tipping point and that the world will change. And for good reason, those leaders are like, okay, we've got to figure this out and see how we can create opportunity in the midst of all of this. But I will offer, make sure that you've got the horse before the cart, and the horse before the cart is the social and emotional health of teams, so that you can innovate, so that you can create and you can lead change that is unlike any other space and time.
I think there's such a construct. I've worked in environments where the innovation was there, but the culture wasn't.
Right.
And the culture is for me, it's such a fragile thing. Because with certain people it was there, with certain people it wasn't, and it just seemed to be And there just seems to be this thing around the innovation where the innovation people are willing to innovate as long as the support around them is there. And there's a whole bunch of things around psychological confidence and that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can have the best ideas and you can have a culture and an environment that will eat those best ideas alive before they ever even get a chance to get out of there. And that is why I am really spending a lot of time talking about that social and emotional health. It's very critical, and the mindset of the organization. And the good news for those leaders in those organizations that are ready to reckon with both, I believe that there's more opportunity than threats ahead. A lot more opportunity, and history has proven a lot more opportunity. But there are threats, and those organizations that don't address and systematically address the mindset of their organization and reconstruct that social and emotional health, will really struggle.
Yeah, I agree. Laura, it's 20 minutes. It goes so quickly.
It does.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your insight. I think there's a number of people I've talked to recently where I said we need to talk again in about a year's time and see what happens, and because things are just happening just so quickly. And I see things where people are. When I saw the pandemic start, people put a load of their command and control policies online, saying this is the way that we're going to lead. And it's like, no, that's just command and control, but done remotely. I think people have been through a certain amount of change, but still we're getting, you've got to be back in the office. Why?
Right. Again, this is great news for the organizations that say, hey, we learned we can get the job done. Now we're going to really take care of our people, and we're going to create an environment where there is some choice and where there's, the opportunity to not only be a part of something bigger than themselves, but also have a life that's beyond work, that is, has greater satisfaction.
Laura, remind people where they can find you.
Laura Goodrich on LinkedIn. That's really the best place. I am there a lot. Also, Laura at GWT Next. That's my email. Drop a note. And our website, GWT Next. You can drop in there as well. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely.